Welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we're going to go over Agent Jean, or in English, Agent John Le Bon, Tome 1, Season 1, Le Cerveau de l'Apocalypse, or the mind of the apocalypse. We've got the two covers here, a soft cover and hardcover version of this book. This is the most recent one. I haven't found the original cover for it. They've changed over time, but they don't have any special issues or special edition covers, holofoil or whatever, like the a lot of the American comics. Those are the two covers that we have that are pretty good overall. This is an ongoing graphic novel style series that started in 2011 and that's extremely popular here in Quebec. It's been published as well in English Canada under Agent John Le Bon, and France, Switzerland, and Belgium. I don't know what the kind of penetration it has in the other markets, but here in Quebec, we're talking close to 50 to 55,000 books sold per unit, which is very, very good, maybe even higher. I'm trying to get better numbers from the edition house, but I'm not sure if they're going to answer my question. The author, Alex A, has been producing a fairly large number of books in this particular format, from Agent Jean, Mini Jean, which is a spin off of Agent Jean, and L'Univers est un ninja, The Universe is a Ninja, which is a prequel to Agent Jean, I would say. It's a bit weird, but it's in the same universe. So overall, since 2011, he published a number of books here, something like 11 Agent Jean, 4 Mini Jean, and 6 L'Univers est un ninja. So the number is rather staggering in terms of for 12 years of production. The book format kind of reminds me of Captain Underpants or Dogman in terms of reach and price point, but in terms of art quality, the art quality in Agent Jean is much higher. It's not as much of a parody comic in a way. There are soft cardboard covers, the regular soft covers, which are around $15 per unit, while there's also an hardcover version for most of the older ones. Those are usually run you around $25, so they are very well priced for the target market. My oldest son has been reading those books since he was around 6 years old. Always really loved them, and we've bought him a few here and there for birthdays and for events, especially those he couldn't get at the school library, which is well stocked with them. I mainly flipped through them in the past. I didn't really read them, but once I actually started reading them, they were extremely funny, imaginative, witty. Those were things that I would expect not only from kids' book, but from comic books in general. So this is a definite plus. One of the weird things here that's seeing how easy it would be to adapt and translate. I'm a bit surprised that it hasn't had as much penetration in other markets. I know it's available in Europe, in the Francosphere, but it could be available just about anywhere, including Asia, without much major adaptation required. Just a simple translation, and it would work pretty much fine. In this story, our main character is Jean, who's an orphaned deer, whose father was the greatest special agent for the agency, which is our James Bond-like special agent organization. He was raised within the agency and by the agency throughout his life, and in this story, he's a probationary officer. He's strong, resilient, witty, and has extremely weird conflict resolution techniques, but they generally work fairly well. He has a fairly bad case of ADHD. He's afraid of llamas and has nostrils big enough that you can put your hands through them. The other character that we follow through most of this story is Henry B. Belton, who's a frog with a calculated IQ of 402. He has a Nobel Prize for the person who's won the most Nobel Prize. He's also the world's most kidnapped individual because every terrorist organization want to have him to devise some of their plans. And he loses his brain early in the story and is equipped with a cybernetic brain replacement, which allows him to still operate. And we'll see why that is. The director of the agency is Madame Martha, who's a cow. And she's not sure if Jean is ready for a full-time job at the agency. She is fairly conservative, but wants what is best for her team. Jean's rival, or another top agent at the agency, is Wixt. It's pronounced exactly as it's written. I have a feeling he's a crocodile with an Elvis haircut, and he is extremely muscled. We see more of him in later stories. In this one, he's more of a side character. We have Jean's adoptive father, more or less Monsieur Moignon, which would be Mr. Stumps. He doesn't have hands, and we're not told how he lost them. It's one of those recurring gags that whenever we try to get the story of how it happens, it never unfolds. He's the intelligence agent for the agency, and he's teaching Jean how to become a proper agent. And finally, we have our villain for the story, Julien Christophe, who's actually Henry B. Belton's brain, who's actually evil and trying to take over the world. I'm not quite sure why your brain would have a different name from you, but I guess in this case, since he's an evil brain, it makes sense. He also has hands and feet. You know, typical brain thing. All right, we're going to go over the story real quick. So we start the story as Jean has to go rescue Henri B. Belton from Farine, Flower, who's a evil biogeneticist. I think he's supposed to be some type of worm. Jean jumps off the plane without a parachute because it's faster, and while he's going down and he's a bit bored, he's reading the full file as to what his objectives are for the mission, as one is wont to do. Henri and Farine are having a discussion at the time, and Farine opens Henry's skullcap with a rusty pizza cutter. Jean breaks through the roof, and they start having a bit of a discussion. And as this goes on, they realize that Henri's brain has disappeared. They end up arresting Farine, bringing Henry back to the agency, and the story more or less begins there as Madame Martha wonders if Jean will make a good agent, and Henri Belton is outfitted with his artificial brain, and we get a bit more character development for Jean as he still is working to become a full-time agent. That night, in the middle of the night, the agency's building is taken over by an unknown entity. Our heroes, and all the members of the agency meet in the command room, and they learn that Julien Christophe, the evil brain, is infecting the building and taking it over. Jean is the only one that can really fit in the aeration vents to go and try to complete, basically try to remove Julien Christophe from his position, and he is motivated by Batman and John McClane into doing the aeration vent scheme, and Henri Belton is going with him to try to stop the brain. They have a few missteps as they're going through the ventilation shafts. They meet a camel that Jean misidentifies for a llama at first, and they find, after a little while, the agency archive where they get the plans of the building so they can find out where the power plant is to go and disable it. As they're looking for the plans and as they're reading some material, an evil robot that he is based off Agent Wixt attacks them. They manage to get the plans and run away, but in order to get to where they want to go, they have to go through the agency containment unit or prison branch where all the criminals that they arrested are in. Julien Christophe releases them in order to slow them down, but Jean manages to beat them up after putting on a pair of sunglasses, as one is wont to do once again. Unfortunately, after that particular brutal action scene, Robot Wixt finds them, and they have to run away using a sock cart and a fire extinguisher. They run away and end up in a stockpile of explosive material, which is the dump of the building. The whole thing blows up, and they end up stuck in the bathroom for a little while. They do manage to escape, and they find a power room where we notice that the entire building is powered by purple matter. Julien Christophe finds them and six other robot agency characters at them. And the only way Jean is able to fight them is by absorbing purple energy and becoming Ultra Jean, his super powered version. We get a low resolution action scene out of it, supposedly drawn by Alex Oz' nephew, 5-year-old Jeremy. Julien Christophe still manages to take over the building as he is also affected by purple energy, and then he turns the agency's building into a giant robot and goes to destroy a nearby town. As a response, Jean and Henri manage to get to the top of the building where Julien Christophe is staying, and Henri basically challenges him with a bunch of brain teasers and challenges until Jean gives him an unsolvable Rubik's Cube that he messed up when they were waiting in the bathroom, waiting to find a way out. Since this puzzle is unsolvable, Julien Christophe gets rather irate and angry and jumps at Henri, who stabs him with a tranquilizer. After all that action and all the supervillains having escaped from jail, Jean is inducted as a full-time agent, and we will progressively see his heroics throughout other stories over time. It is a fairly long story. I mean, it is a something like 96 pages long or so. So it is one of those longer kind of books. It's not just a little floppy or a 42 pages European comic. It does have a bit of weight to it, but there's nothing lengthy about the whole story. As far as artistic merit goes, this is a comedy. It's drawn as a comedy. We've got that bird with teeth there, and Jean falling off the plane as if it's nothing special is happening. So it's a very straightforward style of comedic art. It's not meant to be serious. It's not meant to be realistic in any way, shape, or form. The art is meant to drive the story and not the other way around. All characters are instantaneously identifiable and look great in this style. You might not be able to identify some of the animal. I'm still not sure what kind of animal Wixt is supposed to be. I'm not sure if he's a regular lizard or a crocodile, because we do see a villain crocodile, and they don't look the same. But all the other animals, they're fairly well identified. And even when there's cameos from other characters from anywhere in the world, you can easily identify them. So the art works perfectly well for what it's supposed to do. Same goes with facial expression. Even on a living brain, everything looks great and over the top, which is what we really need here. And the bad guys do look menacing and evil. As we see here, there is that evil crocodile. He doesn't look like Wixt in terms of how he's drawn. So I'm not sure anymore if Wixt is really a crocodile. We've got an evil rhino, an evil shark, all sorts of things, and they all look really good, and they have fun facial expressions coming from them as well. As far as action scenes go, they're generally pretty good and well drawn. It's meant to be simplistic, and it's not meant to be a 6-page action scene with profound dialogue or anything. When we have action here, it's there to drive the comedy forward. But even in those action scenes, the villains are identifiable, even if we don't know their names. The action itself is actually fairly well drawn, and the sound effects don't overtake the panel work as well. The panel work is good, it's not exceptional. We don't have anything really out of the ordinary in terms of panels. The page real estate is well used. There's very few bleeding panels, but we don't have any fancy double pages, fancy overlays, anything like that. It's functional most of the time. And the backgrounds are simplistic or no, I'm not going to say completely absent, but just there to supplement what is going on. So it's not a really profound work in terms of backgrounds, unfortunately. The low resolution action scene really reminds me of Captain Underpants, especially the TV show that's on Netflix. We can suspend our disbelief to believe that this was done by a 5-year-old, even though it's far too complex for a 5-year-old to be doing that. Whenever I look at this, I really think Captain Underpants and the incredibly violent chapter presented in 5-year-old Orama or something like that. It's fun. It's a fun diversion. We get tons of cameos in there, and they're easily identifiable. We've got our Ninja Turtles at the bottom right there. We've got John McClane. We've got Batman. We had the Power Rangers in another scene. There's a lot of nods to popular culture, and they do look the part and are usually well integrated. There's not much depth in the story here. I'm not expecting a profound character piece or a really advanced story which challenges our moral perception. But overall, there are good morals and a lot of good story elements or good things to integrate. Like here in this case, it's very clear you need sunglasses when you find a bunch of mooks, but if a giant robot monster tries to attack you, you actually need a long leather trench coat. That's just how life actually works. As you can see, the comedic elements fit with the story elements really well. On a bit of a more serious note, we have Martha and Monsieur Moignon who are debating if Jean is ready to become a full-time special agent. A lot of it being because they want to protect him because they have been raising him for his whole life. But in the end, it's Moignon, the adoptive father, who has the last word because he points out that Jean has a great combination of skills, kindness, wits, and all of that together. Another element of notes that's not only good as a comedic kind of thing, but also as a more serious on the side thing. Jean's favorite weapon is a water pistol rather than an actual weapon. That's because violence is used to resolve a few of the threats in the book when it's necessary, but most of the threats and most of the issues are resolved through wits and smarts, which is a good moral and a good point to have in kids' books in general, or books that are more targeted towards a younger crowd. We also have a very nice moral in this story, as Jean and Henri B. Belton are stuck in the bathroom waiting to figure out how they're going to get out of there. Henri basically has a moral dilemma as he's wondering why his brain is evil and how his brain has always caused him issues. Jean basically replies to him that, well, you're stuck with the face you have, so you better learn to love it. If it's not to your taste, you'd have to change your tastes. The big moral of this story overall is you gotta love who you actually are, which is a very, very nice moral to have, and a thing a lot more people should be taking at heart. The pacing in this is actually pretty good, but it follows a typical action comic in a way. So you've got action, character development, action, and it rotates through the story in a few different times. So it's actually pretty good. There's no real downtime. Every page moves the story forward. They have enough time to let some of the joke breathe through the story, so it's actually fairly solid in terms of pacing right there. There's just a few of the jokes that are out of place or not really well introduced, like the Ninja Turtle cameo. I mean, they go in the sewers or in the sanitation lines, so the Ninja Turtles are there. That is a bit cliche, I guess, or a bit just introduced. It doesn't work as well as you would think, but it's not a major issue here. We have no pages of people talking around breakfast. It's generally show don't tell for most things. Like when we see the purple matter and the purple energy, we're not given a huge explanation of what it is. It's just, it's a power source, and Jean is able to absorb it and turn into Ultra Jean. That's about it. This has a really old school comic feel to it. Final thoughts? Well, weird fun fact, Brain in DC right now is trying to make himself a human body, which is the opposite of Julien Christophe. Maybe the two of them should team up and Brain go into Henri B. Belton and Julien Christophe goes with the robot body. I don't know. I only went quickly through the later books. I did read Tome 2 completely recently. And they have roughly the same quality in terms of art. The art style doesn't evolve quite a bit, but things get really weird over time. The story elements are actually pretty solid from what my son is telling me. Both my sons love those books, so not just my oldest one, my youngest one also. And they also like the light novel style books that were released A few of them are True Mini Jean, which is a side story with a not a child Jean that I thought it was at first. No, it's a smaller clone. And there's a bunch of silliness, and it's always balanced with good action and good character pieces, which is very nice. So would I recommend this to super serious comic book collectors? Actually, I would. This is light. It's meant to be light. It doesn't have any profound things to it, but it has good overall work in it. So this is what comics used to be like, especially, of course, the comedy style comics. But this is also what your old Superman, your old Batman used to be. This was in a time before Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, which I need to do a video on at some point to explain my thesis as to how those two books basically ruined superhero comics. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. Keep reading comics, keep enjoying them. I'll keep analyzing them, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.